Thank you so much for joining us today, Eloiza Domingo. We're so excited to learn more about the work that you're doing at Allstate to drive diversity, equity, and inclusion. We'd love to first kick it off to you to share a little bit more about yourself and your career in HR as a diversity, equity, inclusion leader.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me today, Ahva. It's a great opportunity just to talk about myself, but more importantly, diversity efforts and how Allstate is, pursuing this work. So, I've been in this field for over 20 years. I started in higher education and student affairs, and then worked my way into academic medicine and pharmaceuticals, and, now in insurance or corporate. It's funny that you asked the question about my career in HR, because I've been really lucky that as a diversity leader, I haven't really lived all the time in HR. When I was working in academic medicine, the diversity work went through the chief operating officer, chief medical officer, and the CEO, as well as the dean of the School of Medicine. So, I think that's actually a really important point is where a company kind of houses the diversity officer of the diversity work is a window into how they see, the diversity work, but also the scope of the role of a chief diversity officer is also indicative of how the company, again, views how this work is imperative and impacts and integrates into the business or the operations of the company. So when I came over to Allstate, I was over at Astellas Pharmaceuticals actually before this. And so Allstate contacted me and asked if I'd be interested in talking with them about this role. I actually wasn't. I wasn't interested. And the funny part about that is because I really loved the culture in pharmaceuticals. I loved the people I was working with. I am very comfortable in healthcare. I really didn't find the need to move at that time, but I was really interested in what Allstate was trying to do. I tell everybody that I was very impressed that Allstate had a 21-year journey of diversity prior to my joining. And it wasn't just this idea of having an office. They had really made very significant strides in diversity, how they were investing their money, spending their money in the community. The way they also talked about diversity in terms of wealth disparities and kind of turning around systemic bias was also good. And so I found that I could get into a company that was already a big hitter in the field of diversity, that maybe I could help them, do more. So I've been really pleased with that decision to leave a company and a culture that I didn't want to leave in the first place. And now I'm over here, and again, very happy with the move.
Thank you for sharing. I think that's one of the main reasons we really wanted to connect with you, to learn more, because we were so impressed. And at Symba, we really do care about these values. And one thing we want to ask about is thinking about how do we make sure that we can measure the success, and that it's really woven into all the practices that you're doing, and it's not siloed like you shared.
Yeah. I'll tell you that diversity work is actually really hard to measure. People say, oh, you can measure it. It's really not, mainly because the field of diversity has been seen for a very long time as what's called a soft science. People do diversity because it's the right thing to do, right? So you do it, and that's it. You check the box. That's your metric. Did I do it? Yes. Do I have a chief diversity officer? Yes. Do I have employee resource groups? Yes. That for me, as a part of my just ethos, is that's not enough. That's just not enough. And so when you talked about, Ahva, how are we measuring diversity? There's a few ways. How are we spending our money? So the top 3 goals for Allstate, 2 of them have to do with where we're putting our money. And so one is spend of supplier diversity. And for diverse suppliers, the other one is how we're investing in diverse organizations, banks. What is our diversity portfolio within our overall investment portfolio? So again, 2 out of those 3 goals have to do with Allstate's money and how we're supporting, communities, which I think is great. The 3rd goal is about representation. So how are we, what we say, mirroring the communities in which we live, work, and serve, and not just the current communities, but predictively, right? So in the next couple of years, Spanish will be one of the number one, if not the number one spoken language in the United States of America. My kids are biracial. That will be very typical, you know, here in the next couple of years, right? And so how are we not just hitting the goals for now and mirroring the communities now? How are we getting in front of that ball, you know, and making sure that we're looking like the nation? Right now, I will tell you, Ahva, we're really glad to be able to say that from our management levels and below, we match the market, which means that we match the United States of America, the demographics of the United States of America. As we get more into the leadership of Allstate, it doesn't look that way. That's a problem for us, right? We want to make sure that we mirror that. So some of the metrics are things like hiring metrics, promotion metrics, so how are we moving our internal talent and valuing that talent? Some of the metrics are also just general representation. Again, what do we actually look like for our various levels? We cut that out by level, we cut that out by various demographics. So those are just some, you know, ways that we make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable to doing the things we say we're going to do. I can give you some real numbers. When we talk about spend, you know, spending for diverse suppliers like you know, Ahva, and investing in that, it's not just, we don't look at it as like, oh, we're going to sign a contract or we're going to sign this check and here you go. What we recognize is that we have quite an opportunity to reverse the wealth gap in the United States of America. There are a number of disparities that have to do with women-owned businesses, LGBTQ-owned businesses, all these businesses that are not provided the same opportunities and haven't been provided the same equitable opportunities over time. How is Allstate contributing to either pursuing that, you know, in a bad way or reversing it, right? So we choose to try to reverse that. And so what we see that as is looking at investing in those companies, because as you know, for every dollar that you're investing in that company, what then happens is that they're then able to employ more people in their communities. They're then able to grow their dollars in that community. So you're replenishing funds in those communities that need it the most, right? And building employment. So, you know, for us, business diversity, which we call supplier diversity, business diversity is a key component of our broader IDE, inclusive diversity and equity strategy. It is also part of our value, as I said earlier. Since 2004, we have tripled our annual spend with diverse suppliers to $5.3 billion. In last year, well, 2 years ago, in 2021, $366 million was spent with 2,000 diverse suppliers. And our goal is that by 2025, we expect to increase that spending with diverse suppliers to $470 million. So we're very, you know, excited about that. The other piece too, as I mentioned before, Ahva, is also our investment in, you know, in these suppliers. So what we've been able to do is look at our algorithm. Just by investing in these diverse suppliers, we've actually created over $680 million of economic impact in the community. As I mentioned earlier, recent analysis shows that for every dollar you spend with diverse suppliers, that drives $1.97 in total economic production. So again, you know, for the work that we're trying to do, we're actually exponentially growing economic impact, you know, in the community. So, and then the last thing is you may or may not be aware that in 2021, we took a stand to expand diversity on Wall Street. We issued the first bond of its kind, $1.2 billion of senior notes through a syndicate that was exclusively for minority-owned enterprises. So minority women, veteran-owned enterprises, first of its kind ever. And as a result of that, we have seen other companies try to do the same. So it's not even that we're doing that for ourselves. What we try to do is also kind of step out of our own comfort zone and show other peers and other companies you can do it too, you know, and it's for really good kind of longitudinal impact.
Absolutely. And as someone who's really directly impacted by the work you're doing here, I want to say thank you so much. It's so important, and we need other leaders to do this and invest. Sometimes the ROI is hard to see, but you're very clear with your metrics, and we need more of that. I know when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, accountability is really important. And you have created a framework, accountability, clarity, transparency. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, full transparency, Ahva, this is like a super exciting thing. So if I talk really fast right now, even faster than I'm doing this, it's because this is super exciting. So you asked me earlier, why did I come to Allstate? It was because Allstate was already doing amazing things in the IDE, inclusive diversity and equity space. There is a pro and a con to that. The pro is that we're doing amazing things. The con of that is that we're doing a lot of amazing things. To make a really big splash, you can't do a lot of a lot. You can't. You have to figure out, what do you want to be really good at? And how are you taking everybody's energy and optimizing on it? Okay. So Allstate is a big company. We're a Fortune 100. We have a lot of really strong thinkers, which essentially turns into kind of this entrepreneurial spirit of doing really good stuff. My first job was to figure out, what are we doing? Like, so inventory, what are we doing? What's Allstate doing, and who's doing it? And where is it around the company? The second thing I had to do is figure out, is it really good stuff, or is it just activities, right? So I had to be very careful about making sure that we weren't telling people don't do that. We were being organized and optimizing on all of the amazing things that were already going on. So we created what's called the ACT framework, as you mentioned, of accountability, clarity, transparency. Okay. Historically, diversity teams are almost always the smallest in a company. People often say to me, my gosh, Eloiza, don't you want more people to work for you? I don't know, not necessarily. Why? Because if I have a massive team that's doing all the diversity work, then everybody will say, well, Eloiza's got all the people and they can do all the work. As opposed to having a lean, mean team, creating a framework like this, which essentially creates 1 to 2 points of contact in each department that are responsible for those 3 goals: representation, diverse spend, diverse investment. And they're all connected through this ecosystem. They're talking to each other, they're sharing best practices, they're reporting out on the corporate scorecard. And they're also doing their own things for their for what we call AORs, areas of responsibility departments, is what we call them. So that, what that framework does, it creates stamina in the work. It creates longevity and legacy programs in the business. It creates accountability because the business is doing the work. It's not Eloiza is giving you something to do, or my team comes in and like clears house or whatever. You're doing this to yourself. The business decides for the business what they're going to do. We are directing traffic and we're supporting it as subject matter experts, but you're basically handing the reins over and saying, you know what? You're responsible for your journey. You are also responsible to contributing to the goals of IDE at Allstate. What are you going to do? But we're also going to give you a framework that you can talk to other people and get a lot of help and support. So that's what that framework does. Frankly, if a company doesn't have a similar framework like that, I would highly encourage you to create some sort of governance system. We don't call it, because it's not about, I'm not governing anybody. I'm just bringing everybody together so that we can optimize. Again, if we say we're going to be the best, we got to figure out how we're going to do that. Together is better, right? So that's how that comes into play.
Thank you for sharing more about that framework, Eloiza. I think that, like you said, more leaders need to adopt something like this. And I am also really intrigued that you share you're a very lean team because you are doing so much. How do you get buy-in to make sure that this whole framework is implemented really over time?
Yeah, that buy-in is really important. About one thing I always joke about with diversity officers, we don't own anything. We don't own anything. I don't own the talent management system. I don't own the way we hire. I don't own the way that we compensate our employees. I don't own the products. I don't own how we make commercials. But what my job is to be very influential, to create a place where diversity is easy to talk about, because diversity can be really scary. It can be a really, really intimidating topic. I strive to make sure that at Allstate, the diversity is approachable. You can see us as partners. We're not going to be the diversity police. We give you options and choices. And so then what happens, Ahva, is the company then sees us as partners to make things better, right? And that's how you make a lot of change really fast. Selfishly, and I'm going to be really frank, Allstate also makes it very, very clear that IDE is a value. It's one of the top 3 values in our shared purpose. It holds a lot of weight in our performance management system. So you have to be an inclusive leader. You have to pull equity throughout the things that you do. It also is rewarded through all of our what we call applause points. So there are ways that the system actually supports me being influential, my team influencing change. But we have a really nice basis here at Allstate already that creates that I want to already be, engaged. And then of course, as we mentioned earlier, we have monthly scorecards, quarterly scorecards, annual scorecards that hold our accountability to quantitative and qualitative measures, as we mentioned earlier.
Thank you for sharing. I think it's really important that you capture kind of all these elements. And I think that it's a fascinating role, and it's really dynamic and exciting because you do get to play with so many different leaders in the organization, and you kind of wear a lot of different hats, and you have to speak many different languages. Yeah. So really have a lot of appreciation for the work you're doing. One thing that, as you know, at Symba, we really care about early careers and thinking about interns, apprentices, and workforce development initiatives. Would love to get your perspective on how important these are for diversity, equity, inclusion.
Yeah, for the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion, these internships, these apprenticeships, flexible work environments, it's so important. As I mentioned earlier, our market is already very diverse. Our labor market and our consumer market is very diverse. It's only going to get more diverse, moving forward. Many of those individuals are those generations are very used to working from anywhere, right? Having the flex to be able to sit here, just like we're doing today, and sit, I'm right in front of my front door, right? I mean, and that's fine, to be able to do that and still be very effective, to have a family, to, get up in the middle of the day and go finish some laundry and come back and still be a very effective leader, right? In order to, that creates a level of diverse hiring opportunities, to hire people from anywhere. It eliminates this idea of geographical boundaries, right? Having interns also is this idea of kind of getting to them when they are kind of young in their career. I mean, one thing that we talk about a lot at Allstate is we realize that when you're in elementary school, middle school, high school, I highly doubt that you're like, I want to be an insurance agent. Like, I don't think that that's like a really sexy, thing. Most people are like, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be an engineer. I'm going to, I want to be a president one day. It's very, I don't know. I think it's very rare, especially more in communities of color and minority communities. This tends not to be a first choice. So that's why we need to keep talking more and more, right, about just this field in general, but also looking, as you mentioned earlier, at how apprenticeships, internships, kind of offering that and just a glimpse in, or a rotational program in some of this work is important. I mean, for me, I've never imagined myself working are you kidding? For an insurance company? Like, I was like, diversity is an inherently risky industry. We joke all the time. CDO, Chief Diversity Officer, is really like Chief Disruption Officer, right? I am paid to disrupt and to push the company over the edge. That's what I'm paid to do. That's also really hard when inherently insurance companies and insurance industries are inherently risk averse, right? I would have never known that I could do this work and do really, really good work if people weren't talking to me about these opportunities, right? So you can be a good chief diversity officer in any company. You can be a really good financial person and economist, in an insurance company. So that's why I think that getting in front of people and educating them earlier, I could imagine I probably would have gone into insurance earlier had I known, that I could have really made some systemic difference earlier in my career. So yeah, it's absolutely critical, Ahva, to be having those conversations and to offer those opportunities.
I would agree 100%. And I think, to your point, being a chief diversity officer in a very risk-averse organization takes a lot more energy and a lot more support to be successful. So really hats off to you. And Eloiza, we'd love to wrap up today with one of our key questions and focus. Our mission at Symba is #OpenUpTheWorkforce. We were created during a fellowship with late Congressman John Lewis, and our vision is to create equitable access to the workforce. We'd love to hear your take on what leaders need to do to open up the workforce.
Yeah. So, right, I love that. First of all, I love that mission. I love that alignment. A couple of things, so aligning to the workforce, when I was in healthcare, we called it patient centricity. So it's this idea of who are you really serving and making them the center of your universe, and really like unapologetically, robustly the center of your universe. So if you're really looking at, kind of opening this up and making sure that your market is your center, or the next market is your center, I think that in general, you need to think about how are you making them happy and productive. Creating this flexibility to recruit, hire, retain in a virtual environment. Virtual first, I think, is really important. Work from anywhere is really important. We all know that the Great Resignation was led by women, people of color, working moms. And the push now to come back into the workplace is actually led by not those people. So that's to listen to how can I still be who I want to be, for me as a single mom, raising biracial children, how can I still be really effective at my job? You've got to focus on those things, and that has to be unapologetically part of your identity. Work from anywhere, virtual work, I think is really important. Listening to also this idea of virtual, flexible work, what's called kind of like, again, designation. So, I mean, I'm looking at a couple things on my notes here. 95% of employees, of our employees voice the need for more flexible work designations, which means like where it is that you're working, right? We had, I had some colleagues of mine personally that moved after COVID to be closer to family, to take care of their moms, take care of their dads, like both of my parents are aging, right? That's amazing. And my company, those companies didn't, blink. So that creates a loyalty, that creates a flexibility, right? Other things too, making sure that leaders have the tools to lead effectively in a virtual environment. I don't know about you, but I never learned how to lead people, how to have hard conversations in Zoom. I never learned that. So giving me those tools, because that's going to be our future, is also critical. And to eliminate any types of biases in these, assessments. Is it always critical to have everybody on camera, all the time, right? Is it always, critical to, like, what are the time zones, right? This idea of proximity bias, essentially, So I think the biggest thing for me, Ahva, as leaders are thinking about this and making this central to their market, is understand who your market is, first of all, and then again, unapologetically align to what their values are, and kind of what they need to be successful and productive.
That is so powerful. Eloiza, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you for all these tangible insights that I'm so excited to listen to this over again and take away from. Thank you so much for all of your impact and work. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.